Well, we have a lot to get through this morning, and we're going to get started on time so that we can get through everything that we need to get through. Thank you for joining us this morning. Good morning. I'm Jackie Downing. I'm the Senior Director of Grantmaking and Nonprofit Support for the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Valerie Knight-DeGangi, the Program Officer for the Valley Community Foundation, to help you decide in this first half-hour session which grant process or processes are right for you. We're going to ask that you put questions in the question and answer section so that we can manage them a little easier. If they're in both chat and question and answer, it's a little hard for us. So please put your questions in question and answer. We may take a couple of breaks and stopping points, and then we'll take another break at the end to try to get to all the questions today. If we go over your question and skip it, it may be because we know we're going to be covering it later in the webinar. So we will get to all of the questions as we get through the day.
Thank you, Jackie, and good morning, everyone. I'm Valerie Knight-DeGangi, and I am here to discuss the 3 steps that you need to do before you apply. When you are going through your thought process about how to prepare a grant, the first thing you need to do is your research. Talk to different people, look at websites, wellness reports. We recently published the community index for the Valley region. There are a number of different areas that you can look at in order to figure out exactly what you want to apply for a grant. Identify collaborators and partners. We want to make sure that if there are people that are doing complementary work that makes sense for you to work on a project together, feel free to do that. We want to make sure that there are opportunities for you to be able to look at community leaders, different funders, other government entities, other nonprofits who might be able and willing to support your grant project. Last but not least, please structure your program and request. Define your goals, your outcomes, and your measures. Prepare a preliminary budget. Write an implementation plan. Develop a fundraising strategy, because we at the foundations want to make sure that we are not your only source of funding, because we cannot obviously fund every project that comes before us. And we want to make sure that you all have looked at what other types of funding is available, and then select the potential funders to apply to. Then, after all this is done, we want you to write your proposal. And from past experience, both Jackie and I always tell everyone that before submitting your proposal to us, please have someone else read it and make sure that all the possible questions are answered. You may be so very passionate about the work that you are doing, and we know that you all are, but sometimes that passion may cloud your ability to see directly the questions that we are looking for you to answer. So always have another set of eyes. It's a really great opportunity to find things that can be even more clarified for the grant. Our competitive grant eligibility is for all of the applicants to be tax-exempt organizations under 501c3 or any applicable section of the IRS Revenue Code, or have a fiscal sponsor who is 501c3. Applicants must provide service in at least one town of our 20-town region or one of the 5 valley towns for a VCF request, that can also be located outside of our 20-town region. The 20 towns include Ansonia, Bethany, Branford, Cheshire, Derby, East Haven, Guilford, Hamden, Madison, Milford, New Haven, North Branford, North Haven, Orange, Oxford, Seymour, Shelton, Wallingford, West Haven, and Woodbridge. All applicants must adhere to a policy of non-discrimination, and projects that do not necessarily receive consideration include religious activities, endowment campaigns, travel, previously incurred debts, and funding deficits. Applicants who are past grantees must be in compliance with all grant reporting requirements.
So as we move through the webinar this morning, we're going to ask you to keep these things in mind as you determine which grant process is right for you. Many of them have different criteria, so you'll want to know which ones you fit into and which ones fit your needs. We have some processes that have deadlines and some that are rolling applications. If you can't make a deadline, then you may want to think about having an application for one of the rolling processes. There are also eligibility criteria. Some of our processes require that you've been doing programs for at least 2 years. If you have not, then that limits where you can go. There's also a limitation on our small grants of an operating budget of $2 million or less. Make sure that you're applying for a program that you're eligible for. What level of funding do you need? As the grant award size goes up, so does the level of competition. So apply for what you need to have the best outcome. If you can achieve your goals with a smaller grant, consider a process that might give you a faster and more favorable answer. What type of funding do you need? Responsive is general operating support, totally flexible, but small grants are for program and capacity building and general operating. And we'll talk more about those in the later webinars. General operating is totally flexible funding, can be used for any expense to further an organization's mission. Program is program specific, and capacity building is defined as a short-term infusion of money for long-term infrastructure improvement. So purchasing a piece of equipment, bringing in a consultant to help the organization become stronger, that's capacity building. When is the funding needed? Along with the application deadlines, there are different turnaround times for grant awards. How quickly do you need an answer? When do you need to start to use the funds? Remember, previously incurred expenses cannot be charged to grants. So if you're doing a summer program in June and the responsive funding decision is made in July, your June expenses are not eligible to be credited against that grant. You need to come in for some funding sooner than that. So when is the funding needed? Previously incurred expenses cannot be charged to grants. So this is a grant list of all the available grants for nonprofits serving both Greater New Haven and Valley residents. These are all combined processes that we do together. It's one door in on these processes. So you can find the applications both on the New Haven site and on the Valley site. We'll talk more about these in the subsequent webinars. I just want to go through the brief overview of these. Responsive grants, general operating support, the deadline is March 2nd. The webinar immediately following this one goes into great detail about the responsive grants and the applications themselves. So general operating support is if you are based in New Haven and serve more than 50% of your population is in our 20-town region, then you can come in for a general operating support. If you are serve less than 50% of your population in our 20-town region, then you must come in for a statewide or multi-region program. And that program is defined as what you do in Greater New Haven. Later in the year, we'll be releasing an RF, we'll be accepting letters of intent for capital projects. We do not have this fully defined at this point. We do know that there will be 1 or 2 grants made this year for capital grants up to $60,000 in expenditures. They could be 1 or 2 year grants, and that process will not happen until August. Animal shelter grants, open to everyone. Nonprofit management program for emerging leaders of color, a wonderful cohort program that lasts 2 years for the participants. We'll talk more about those, and the consultant support program, short-term help for an organization. We are working on the details of our basic needs fund and community fund for women and girls. We'll announce soon when those processes are going to be happening.
We can look at now the grant opportunities that are very similar in focus between both New Haven and the Valley. New Haven has the small grants program, which is very similar to the Valley Needs and Opportunities grants. We both have sponsorships. And then there are some very specific ones, the Q River Fund, which has already passed. And for us in the Valley, we also have the Community Grant Program. Deadline is March 3rd, and the COVID-19 Response and Recovery Fund, which is ongoing. For Valley-based organizations, they are those, again, that are serving Ansonia, Derby, Oxford, Seymour, and Shelton. We're going to provide a much more in-depth look at all of these processes in subsequent webinars.
Thank you, Val. So the responsive grant types, general operating support. If you're interested in general operating support, these grants are totally flexible funding that you can use to further your mission. It's not really for a specific project or purpose. We ask you about what your organization does as a whole, not what program or outcome is specific to this grant. You must have more than 50% of your population served living in the greater New Haven and or Valley area. You have to have up-to-date and published Give Greater profile. We'll talk more about that. It must be up-to-date and published by the deadline, which is February 23rd for the Give Greater profile, March 2nd for the application. You have to have been in business for at least 2 years, have active programming for at least 2 years. If you already have a general operating support grant or a responsive grant that is continuing, that extends beyond 2023, if your funding goes through 2024, you may not apply this year. Grants this year are up to $50,000 and they are 1-year grants. And as I said, the applications are available on both of our websites. This can be used for ongoing or new programs. It can be used for administration. It can be used for infrastructure. It allows you really to be who you are. And we hope that you will identify other funders and commitments, identify partnerships within what you may be doing, and have a long-term funding strategy, because general operating support is never forever. So we want to be knowing what happens when our funds run out. The responsive program support for statewide and multi-region organizations. This is not a choice that you make between general operating and multi-region. You are either 50% of your population or more is in our region, or less than 50% of your population is in our region. If less than 50% of the population you serve is in our region, you must apply for statewide and multi-region program support. The program is defined as the work you do in one or more towns of the Community Foundation's region. And this has the same criteria. You must have the Give Greater profile. You must have been in active programming for at least 2 years. If you have an ongoing grant, you're not eligible to apply. It's up to $50,000. It's a 1-year grant, and the application is available on both our websites. We'll talk a little bit about the capital, because as I said earlier, we are developing the criteria for this that will be requiring a Give Greater profile. Again, if you have an ongoing grant that goes into 2024, you are not eligible to apply. You must have had active programming for at least 2 years. These grants will be up to $60,000, and they may be 1 or 2-year grants. It is for things like land acquisition, building acquisition, construction, renovation, physical plant improvements, or capital equipment purchases. If you're buying small pieces of equipment, you might be able to put that under the responsive general operating support. If you're buying really small equipment, you might be able to do that under capacity building in a small grant application. This is a large investment. This is going to be reserved for 1 or 2 grants made during this year for larger capital projects that organizations have in mind.
Thank you, Jackie. Now we're going to talk a little bit about nonprofit animal shelter grants. Any nonprofit animal shelter that is serving the greater New Haven area is eligible to apply for up to $7,500 in funding through the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven's Conopackey Fund. The average grant for this program is about $3,000 to $5,000. New or existing programming, organizational capacity building, or capital can be applied for out of this program, and that is both Greater New Haven and the Valley. Next slide, please. The nonprofit management cohort of emerging leaders of color, there is currently, for those folks that are in leadership positions in Greater New Haven and Valley nonprofits, say a program director, development director, finance director. There are 10 to 12 people will be participating in 2023. There is flexible funding, $10,000 per year for 2 years. The applications open on April 2nd, and the deadline to apply is June 5th. We are looking at people who are demonstrating personal commitment to Greater New Haven and the Valley. Professional development and leadership pipeline development is a very big part of this cohort program. Applications will be focused specifically on the qualities and aspirations of the leader of color and not the organizational's goals. It is a 2-year program, which includes a 9-month course with UConn and a 2nd year of leading and organizational assessment and cohort meetings. And as you can see, the application will be available on our website, both the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven and the Valley Foundation website, after April 2nd. Our consultant support program, as Jackie has described a little bit previously, is short-term projects support for building capacity or board staff work on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. It can include money for a consultant's time and other expenses, but we should want you to note that this is discrete project funding. It should not be used as part of a larger engagement with a consultant. For instance, we will not pay the first $1,000 towards a $10,000 strategic plan. We have a list of vetted consultants for you to select from, or you can engage with your own consultant. Maximum funding is $2,000 in this program, and organizations may only receive funding from this program for one time in 2023. This grant award will not impact any eligibility for any other program that you might wish to apply for. For further information, you can contact my colleague, Stephanie Chung. Her contact information is on the slide, or me to discuss this further. And I believe we have one question in the chat that Jackie is going to be covering.
Right. And that question is, can an organization apply for both types of responsive grants, capacity and capital? So there is no capacity. There is general operating support, and there is program. An organization can only be eligible for one of the or the other of those. They can't be eligible for both of those, so they can apply for that. And an organization cannot then apply for a capital responsive grant. An organization can only apply for one type of responsive grant, but an organization can apply for consultant support. A candidate can come in for the Emerging Leaders of Color program. You can also come in for an animal shelter grant. Those things can be done in combination, but you have to choose the priority for your organization. When you're applying for a responsive grant, you can only come in for one responsive grant. And going on, let's talk a little bit. Now, these next slides that we'll talk about are New Haven specific. So if you are based in the Valley, these grants have similar counterparts in the Valley Community Foundation, but you are not eligible to apply to the New Haven Foundation, the Greater New Haven Community Foundation, for grants. These are New Haven only. And the first is the New Haven Small Grants Program. It's available to organizations with annual operating budgets less than $2 million. There are 3 types of applications: general operating support, totally flexible; project or program support, which is program specific. It can be a combination of programs or one program; and capacity building, investing in your infrastructure. The grants are up to $15,000. They are 1 year only, and it's a rolling application. So you can apply at any time in the year. You can only apply every other year. If you got a small grant in 2022, you are not eligible to apply until 2024. But if you did not get a small grant last year, you can apply this year. It's about an 8 to 10 week turnaround from the time you put in the application. You may get questions back from the person who's been assigned to review your application. It then goes to a panel here within the foundation, and you'll be hearing from a contact within 8 to 10 weeks. You can apply for a responsive grant and a small grant, but you cannot apply for general operating support, a small grant. You could do a capacity building project, but you cannot have 2 general operating support grants from the Community Foundation in the same year. I'm going to answer Lewis's question that's in the chat. The applications for responsive grants are 1 door in. It is 1 application. So there are not 2 separate applications for the Valley and the New Haven Foundations. You submit 1 application. Make sure that you talk about the percentage of the population that you serve that is in the Valley, and we will be able to make a determination whether that would be a combined application and would look at combined funding, or whether that would be Valley specific or New Haven specific. So we make that call once the application comes in as to where we think that organization falls, but it is 1 application for a responsive grant. Also, the New Haven only based organizations, sponsorships. If you've applied for any other grant, you are always welcome to come in for a sponsorship. These are 1-day virtual or in-person fundraising events, festivals, or fairs. We do not support conferences or multi-day programs, or even a neighborhood event, a block party, things like that. The funding is up to $2,500. They're rolling applications, so you can apply at any time. It takes about 4 weeks to turn around. So if you have an event that's coming up, the earlier you get in the application, the better. We need to know in advance. If you only have 3 weeks before and you're applying to us, we may not be able to make a decision in time.
Thank you, Jackie. And we're going to round out this section of the webinar with Valley-specific grants. The first one is for our community grants process. And by the way, we will be having a more in-depth look at these processes in the webinar that we're going to be having later on this morning. Community grants are for civic engagement. They're available for the organizations in the towns that we've discussed so far. They are only available to groups or organizations with 2 or fewer full-time equivalent staff members. They are basically grants to support efforts for small grassroots, mostly volunteer, and neighborhood group programs. The group applying must have a checking account in place, but you do not need to have a 501c3 or equivalent. This is the only grant program in either one of our foundations that you do not need to have a 501c3 or equivalent. You just need to have a checking account. Examples of prior support for community grants include, but are not limited to, funds for neighborhood cleanups, community garden support, elderly and parent activities, and youth engagement projects. Currently, we are in the process of revising our application, but I believe that it should be should be solid and up on the website, and we will be accepting applications from now through March 3rd. The deadline is 5 o'clock that day. And as you can see, there is up to $2,500 available through the community grants process. Next slide, please. Our needs and opportunities grants, as I've mentioned before, are very similar to the small grants program in New Haven, except we have a few different things that I want to share with you. First of all, grants are available for programs that are looking for $250 to $10,000. So that's a little bit different than what the small grants program is in New Haven. It is specifically for innovative and ongoing programs and emergency needs, again, for organizations that are based in our towns or whose majority of services are performed in the towns. And applications are available up on our website. Some examples of previous support include, but are not limited to, funds to repair a damaged boiler system or leaking roof, a fund to publish the Riverfront Greenways Guide, which helped residents fully enjoy the riverfront areas in our valley, and certainly some other grants that are really looking to do innovative projects, whether it is an after-school program or something that is working with seniors. We are very flexible with these dollars, and they can cover everything from general operating support to capital and capacity building. Next slide, please. Last but not least, we also have a sponsorship program for Valley-based organizations. For us, it is focusing specifically on one-day events, and there is a $2,500 limit per organization per year. Again, this one you must be a 501c3 or equivalent, or must have a fiscal sponsorship available for you. The $2,500 can be broken out between several events. So let's say you have a special event that you do in the spring and then one in the fall, and you need $1,000 for the spring and another $500 or $1,000 for the fall. You can apply to us for both of those. That would be fine. It is a rolling application, and we need at least 60 days in advance for a thorough review of this application. As Jackie has said, if it comes in before the 60-day time frame, we may not necessarily be able to provide you with sponsorship support. So please make sure that as soon as you know when your event is happening, that you submit an application, which is available on the website on the slide.
There's only one question in the chat. How many responsive grants, not capital, are typically awarded in a year? I wish there were a typical year. There are no such thing as a typical year. I've seen everything range between 40 and into the 70s. So it depends on how much is requested by each applicant. We ask that you ask what you really need. If it's a $50,000 cap, if you really don't need the 50, it helps us support more organizations if the request is smaller. So there is really no number that I can tell you that the number of grants. Last year we had Stepping Forward resources that helped us make extra grants. Those Stepping Forward resources are not part of this year's process. So there will be somewhat less money available in the responsive process this year, although Stepping Forward dollars are still being used in other processes. So we have no idea what the number could possibly be. Just want to show you one last page. This is the resource page. If you have general questions and would like to, you can contact me. If you have general questions or you need technical support on the online application, Logan Roddy is the man to help. Reporting and evaluation questions, Kara Strawn can do that. You have to have all of your reports in. Kara was one who will be able to tell you whether or not your reporting is up to date. She can also help you devise your outcomes that are part of the applications. We'll talk about that in the next half hour. Stephanie Chung is the Give Greater guru, and she is also heading up the sponsorship program this year. Animal shelter grants are being led by Luis Rodriguez, so you can reach out to Luis. And for all things Valley and the general questions on all of the combined processes, Valerie Knight-DeGangi is the resource. So thank you very much. I don't see any other questions in the chat. I hope you're staying for the next session, which is going to be on our responsive grants. We thank you for your time this morning. We'll see you again soon.
Consideration. There will be opportunity to talk and share updates. For the login screen for online applications accessing Blackbaud, this is our system for accessing all of our online applications. If you have not applied to the foundations in the past several years, you will need to create a new account and a new password. Your existing account and password would no longer be active. The applications are posted on both of our websites, the VCF website, the Community Foundation website, and they're accessible by clicking on the application links. Organizations must complete an application for consideration in any grant process. There is an eligibility quiz to make sure that you are eligible to complete a grant application with us. For the organization's information to include as part of your application, we need your name, we need your EIN or your employer identification number. If you are using a fiscal sponsor, you need to enter the EIN of the fiscal sponsor in that line, the year that you were incorporated, the street address, city, state, and zip, website, and your organization's mission and vision statement, which is 500 words or less. The mission will be pre-populated if you have already submitted any information to us in our Blackbaud system. The information that is requested is the same for both applications, both GOS and multi-region program. As I mentioned before, if you need a fiscal sponsor, you complete the information that's on the slide. You can leave this information blank if you are not using a fiscal sponsor. And again, this is the same for both applications. We also need the contact information for your organization. You can list the CEO or your board chair if you're an all-volunteer organization, and a contact for requests. This is the person who is most familiar with the grant request and is the same for both applications. The request information is basically to tell us what is the total amount that you are looking for. And as you see, it cannot exceed $50,000. How did you determine the amount of this request? We need that to be under 250 words. You want to make sure that when you are looking at this request, you are looking at what your actual expenses are. General operating support requests are for flexible dollars, so we don't ask about programming. For multi-region orgs, we need to know what your programs are that are impacting our service area. This is the difference between the two applications. The first two questions here are on both of the applications. The third question is specifically only on the multi-region program application, and at 750 words, it is very important.
Thank you, Valerie. So the next few slides are the bulk of your application. Note that these are at the top, say GOS. So the way that these questions are asked on the next few slides are the general operating support. If you are 50% or more of your population is in Greater New Haven, this is the way you're going to fill out your application. And we're asking you to list 1 to 3 outcomes that your organization will achieve during the time period of the grant, in terms of its impact on the community, Then we ask for the outcome. Outcomes are brief. They are changes in behavior or circumstances of the people you serve, changes in a neighborhood or a system. We will run a food pantry that's open 4 days a week is not an outcome, it's an activity. The outcome might be that 200 families will experience less food insecurity. So what is the outcome? What is the change in behavior or condition? That becomes your outcome. And this is talking about the community that you serve. What are your activities then to achieve that outcome? And why are these outcomes a priority for the people that you serve? This is where you can talk about the need in the community, what you've experienced, if you've been doing this, or as I've said, you've had programs for 2 years. If you've had this experience, please tell us stories about what you have done and what you've experienced and the changes that you have made. The next slide is about community impact. Again, you've talked to us about the outcomes. How do you now evaluate the effectiveness of the program? How do you know the things you've just said are true? And then based on the results of this evaluation, give us 3 or 4 examples of how your population has benefited from your programs. So this is an actual accomplishments. What have you been doing? And how did you get this information? And what have you done?
Thanks. Oh, sorry, Jackie, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Is there a question?
No, all good.
Go ahead, Val.
Thank you. So the next section is specifically on how general operating support will impact your organization. Jackie was very specific about community. Now we're going to focus on organization. List the 1 to 3 outcomes that your organization will achieve during the time period of the request in terms of the impact on the organizational's strength. The outcome needs to be less than 255 characters. And what are your planned activities to achieve your outcome? And why are the outcomes a priority for your organization? This is all about how this general operating support grant will impact the work that you do as an organization. What are the outcomes that you've listed as a priority? Are they listed in your strategic plan? Are they aligned with your mission and vision?
Okay, so those were the way the outcome questions are stated on the general operating support grant. This slide is the outcomes that are listed on the multi-region and statewide application only. We ask for 1 to 4 outcomes, a combined 1 to 4 outcomes that your organization will achieve combined on the population that you serve in Greater New Haven, not your general population, or in terms of your organization's infrastructure. So what is the outcome? What are your activities to achieve the outcome? The same format, but slightly different in that we're only asking about the target population that you serve in Greater New Haven, or the infrastructure of your organization that helps you serve Greater New Haven. What are the outcomes? What are your activities toward those things? Why are these a priority? How do you evaluate the effectiveness of your programming? And then list for us 3 or 4 examples of the difference you've made in the Greater New Haven population that you serve.
Thank you, Jackie. The next part is going to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. What steps have you taken to address equity within your organization? For instance, have you, your staff, members, or your board participated in any trainings? And if so, how do they inform your work? Does your organization have any policies and procedures about diversity, equity, and/or inclusion? If you don't have a policy, please let us know why you don't. Are you working on one? Perhaps that would be fine. Your DE&I journey is basically how your organization has maintained, achieved, or pursued greater diversity, equity, and inclusion in the following categories: in your board, practices and policies, programs, and staffing. Each one of those are drop-down items. Either you have done your work area in these areas or you have not. Even if you're an organization that is led by people of color, we'd like to know what you are doing to ensure equity in your practices. And in further detail, describe the work achieved in each of the categories selected above. So there is that ability for you to tell us a little bit more about the work that you're engaged in or that you're proposed to be engaged in. If there's any work that your organization that is accomplished that is not reflected in the list above, please share in that very last bullet section for under 500 words. The demographics section is very specific and pretty straightforward. We're looking to see for general operating support, your total number served directly and indirectly. For the multi-region applications, total number served by your whole organization and the number served in our 20-town region. Define your target market as specifically as possible. Race, ethnicity, gender, age, varied abilities, sexual identity, orientation, geography, income status, less than 500 words. The town served by the percentage, race and ethnicity, gender ethnicity, age by number, income by number. And an explanatory paragraph telling us if you are using estimates or why you do not capture this information. If you do not have very specific numbers to share with us, give us approximate numbers. If you can make an informed guess, do and tell us that that's what you did. If you don't collect us, that's where you can put in the explanatory paragraph.
Next section is the financial section. So we will ask you for the income and expense figures for your most recently completed fiscal year, as well as the projected income and expense figures for the fiscal year that you are in at the time of the application, the current fiscal year. If there's more than a 15% difference between the 2 years, please, there's a box for explanation. So that we know if you had some extraordinary income or some extraordinary loss, we'd like to know what the change was. So we see which year was the anomaly and which is more a general operating year. We'll also ask you for the other sources of support that your organization generally gets. The other sources of support we ask you by percentage. And base this on this year's budget, if it's a typical year, or base it on some year that is a typical year. Where does your funding come from so that we see where the sources of income are for your organization, other than the grant you're applying for? Also within financials, and all of these are the same for both applications, we'd like to know about the financial health of your organization. Let's talk about cash flow. If that's strong for you, if you have an operating reserve, good for you. If you have an endowment, good for you. It does not weigh against you if you have an endowment. So please let us know that you're in a strong financial position. If you have a line of credit, if you've drawn down against it, let us know how much is outstanding so that we have a picture of where you are financially. We ask you to describe your board members and committees' roles in fundraising and fiscal oversight. We want a little bit more than just the documents that they see. We'd like to know how involved they are and what roles they actually take on. And then if you could describe for us what would happen if you do not receive funding from the foundations. How will it affect your operations or your ability to serve the community? What programs would be discontinued? What would stop? Would you lose staff? What would happen if you don't receive the funding? There are several attachments that you'll need to give us. You'll need to give us a current operating budget, income and expense for the current fiscal year. And if you are a multi-region organization, it's just the income and expense budget for the Greater New Haven region programs. So general operating is the full organization. The multi-region is just the Greater New Haven programs. We'll also need to, general operating needs to give us an operating budget for the first fiscal year in which the funds are requested. So how does our money fit into your budget for the fiscal year? And then the multi-region, the same question for how it fits into the Greater New Haven programs. And if you have a strategic plan, it's helpful for us to see how our funding is going to help you move forward toward that plan. And there is a Give Greater checklist. We'll talk a little bit more in the next couple of slides on Give Greater, but you need to look at this checklist and make sure that you have done all of the items on the Give Greater checklist. We had applicants last year who prepared the wrong profile, did not do the checklist, and did not know that they did not do the profile. So let's talk a little about that. Give Greater is not the Great Give. You have to have a givegreater.org profile as part of the application. If you currently have a givegreater.org profile, you have to update it, and it has to have a current status as of February 23rd or later. So at the top of your dashboard, you'll see a box that says when your profile expires. It must expire February 23rd or later. If you do not have a Give Greater profile, you have to go to the site, click on the gray Open a Profile link, and get started. The Great Give is the online giving event. The Great Give takes one paragraph, 2 pictures, and a logo. Give Greater has multiple tabs that ask you to upload your financial statements, your list of board members, and their demographics, your staff members and their demographics, a description of your programs, your mission, accomplishments, and your needs. It is multiple tabs. It is far more extensive than the Great Give. It is not a giving event. It's a 24/7, 365 database for our community. We often send donors there when they ask about who they can give to. So we highly recommend that you have a Give Greater profile anyhow, but make sure you've got a robust one. It is an integral part of the review process. We don't ask you in your application about your programs because we have the Give Greater profile. So we'll ask you to make sure that your Give Greater profile is completed. If you have any questions, Stephanie Chung will be the person to help you with that.
Thank you, Jackie. Finally, if you are successful and are able to get a grant from the foundations, the following are conditions of all responsive grants as far as reporting goes. You need to submit an annual report on the progress made toward your outcomes. You need, as Jackie said, to update your existing givegreater.org profile, and subsequent years of funding are conditional based on performance and progress towards the stated outcome. If you have received a multi-year grant from us in the past, then the subsequent year's funding will be conditional based on your performance and progress again towards those outcomes. All reporting requirements need to be met in order to apply to the foundations and to receive additional funding. And last but not least, here is a slide that goes through all of the resources that we have available at the foundation. For general questions, please contact Jackie Downing. General questions, technical support for online applications, our colleague Logan Roddy. Reporting and evaluation questions and outcome questions, our colleague Kara Strong. Sponsorship and givegreater.org questions for Stephanie Chung. Animal shelter grants, Luis Rodriguez. And I am available for all Valley grant processes and general questions.
Thank you, Val. And we do have a couple of questions we'll get to very quickly. Beverly Kidder asked about if you're a food pantry, what is the measurement of an outcome? Beverly, I'm going to ask you to get in touch with Kara Strawn, who is on the last slide. Kara can talk you through outcomes. There are lots of outcomes about the number of people that you're impacting, about the communities that you're serving, about the difference that you're making. So she'll be able to help you craft those. For the total number served, what are the date parameters for this? This is 1 year, total served in 1 year. And Lewis, if you do not get the general operating responsive or program support in March, can you apply for capital later in the year? Or can an organization submit an application for only one or the other? An application can only submit one responsive grant application in the year. So we're asking you as an organization to decide what is the priority for your organization at this time. A capital project is generally a multi-year activity. So it may be that next year may be a better time for an application for a capital project that may not be ready for granting this year. So decide if you are at that phase where you absolutely need that last money in or that influx, then that's an appropriate capital project for this year. If you're just designing what that capital project is going to be, you have no other funders available or secured at this time, you may want to wait a year before you come in for capital support. Yes, the slides and the recording will be available on the both foundations' websites after this meeting. And we are going to switch now to the Valley presentation. If you're joining us for the Valley presentation, we'll be with you in just a moment. And there we are.
Thank you, Jackie. And I know that you're going to hit the recording button, I believe, or it may be still recording. Is that correct?
It is still recording.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. My name is Valerie Knight-DeGangi. I'm the program officer for the Valley Community Foundation. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Jackie Downing, who is the Senior Director of Grantmaking and Nonprofit Support for the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. We're here to walk you through the application processes for grants specifically at VCF, and let's begin. For the competitive grant application, which those of you who have been with us since the very beginning of this webinar, this is for general operating support, and it is requiring that you are either a 501c3 or equivalent, or you find a fiscal sponsor. For our competitive grant process, the Valley shares that process with the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, and applicants must provide services in at least one or more of our 5 Valley towns of Ansonia, Derby, Oxford, Seymour, and/or Shelton, or one of the other towns in the 20-town region located on the map on this slide. Applicants must adhere to a policy of non-discrimination. Any applicant who is a previous recipient of a grant from us within the past 3 years must have submitted all of their required reports. Projects that do not generally receive consideration include religious activities, endowment, campaigns, travel, previously incurred debt, and funding deficits. Requests for capital projects, building equipment, vehicles, and other depreciable items will only be accepted as part of our Needs and Opportunities program, and may include requests that are related to organizations managing the impact of COVID-19 still. Applicants who are past grantees must be in compliance with all grant reporting requirements.
So these are the guiding principles that the community foundations have together decided are a good foundation for a nonprofit in our investments. So as you're preparing your applications, we ask you to keep these things in mind and make sure that you surface them in your applications so that we know that your organization is thinking about these things as well. We want you to have vision for the community, clear goals and objectives for how you're going to impact the community, informed by a planning process that includes input from stakeholders and people that you serve, people with lived experience. We want you to be mindful of how your mission and your work contribute to improving the social and structural determinants of equity. We want you to be accountable, have an ongoing system of evaluation so that you know what you're doing is making a difference and have a strong way of reading that. We want you to have a good vision for your organization as well. clear goals and objectives on how to improve your governance, your management, your operations, and your programs. We hope that you'll have a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion, that both your board and your staff members reflect the community that you serve, and that you have policies and procedures in place that respect and advance DE&I. And we hope that you have sound practices for financial management with a lens for sustainability. Remember that the foundations are never going to be a perpetual source of revenue, so you'll have to have ways that you know that you are going to maintain a vital organization through additional funding. So as we go through the slides today, let's think about these questions to determine which grant processes are right for you. Some have deadlines and some are rolling processes. If you can't make a particular deadline, then you'll want to make sure that you're coming in for a rolling process. So think about when you can prepare your applications. What are the eligibility criteria? Not all processes are open to all types and sizes of organizations. Where do you fit in based on budget size, how long you've been in business, and whether or not you have a 501c3? What level of funding are you needed? As the grant award size goes up, so does the level of competition. So apply for what you really need. If you can achieve your goals with a smaller grant, consider a process that might give you a faster and more favorable answer. What type of funding do you need? Do you need general operating support, totally flexible funding, or is what you're looking for program support for one or more specific programs, or capacity building? An investment in your organization's infrastructure, whether through equipment or consultants or training, that will help you be a stronger organization. That will may dictate which process you come into. And also, when is the funding needed? Along with application deadlines, there are different turnaround times for grant awards. How quickly do you need the answer? When do you need to start using the funds? Remember, previously incurred expenses cannot be charged to grants. So if you're doing a summer camp in August and you apply for something, if you're doing a summer camp in June and you apply for a grant that you're going to get an answer for in July, you cannot book those June expenses against that grant. You have to have the funding secured before you start incurring those expenses. So when do you need your funding? This year, our competitive grant process, our responsive grant process, is for 1 year's support. So we are asking that you keep in mind that this is 1 year support. It's a reset year for us. We will have competitive processes again in 2024. So these are the processes that are combined, Greater New Haven and Valley-based organization, combined processes where it's one door in, one application, and you can come in for the grants and they are considered as a combined application. We have responsive grants that are general operating support. If 50% or more of the population you serve lives in the 20-town region served by the foundations, then you're eligible for general operating support. If less than 50% of the population you serve lives inside the region, then you must apply for statewide or multi-region program support. And that program is defined as the program you do in the 20-town region. It is not your choice to choose whether you get general operating or program. It is dictated by the population that you serve. It's either 50% or less, 50% or more, or 50% or less. We dictated that way. There will be responsive grants for capital projects. There will be a letter of intent due in August. We're still defining the application process for this. As you go through this, remember that you can only apply for one responsive grant. So your organization has to decide which priority is for your organization, whether you are poised for a capital grant for this year or whether you need general operating support. Nonprofit animal shelter grants, we'll talk more about those. Those are available at any time. You can apply for responsive as well as animal shelter grants. Nonprofit management program for emerging leaders of color. This is about taking middle management people who are people of color and helping them be the pipeline for our leadership in nonprofits, and the consultant support program, a short-term project. Also, you can apply for either of those along with responsive. We are still defining the deadlines and processes for our basic needs fund and community fund for women and girls. Those are still to be announced, but those processes will be coming.
Thank you, Jackie. Now we're going to look specifically at the competitive grant opportunities that are available for Valley-based organizations. So this slide is going to talk about the deadlines, and we're going to delve into them in a few more minutes in the next coming slides. The Community Grant Program deadline is due on March 3rd at 5 o'clock. The remaining of our Valley-specific applications are ongoing and rolling: sponsorships, needs and opportunities, and our COVID-19 Response and Recovery Fund. Please note that the current focus for that fund is on vaccination support and basic needs. Community grants are specifically for Valley-based organizations and are focused on civic engagement. They're available to orgs that are based in our 5 Valley towns of Ansonia, Derby, Oxford, Seymour, and Shelton, or whose majority of services are performed in these towns. They're available to organizations with 2 or fewer full-time equivalent staff members, and organizations do not need to be a 501c3 equivalent. This is the only grant program between the 2 foundations that you do not need to be a 501c3 or have a fiscal agent who is a 501c3. However, the group that is applying needs to have a checking account in place. There is up to $2,500 available per organization for each one of these grants. Examples of prior support include, but are not limited to, funds for neighborhood cleanups, community gardens, elderly and parent activities, and youth engagement projects. All of our applications are available on the Valley Foundation website. Our Needs and Opportunities grants are for innovative and ongoing programs and emergency needs. Again, available to organizations that are either based in or serving the people in our 5-town region. There must be 501c3 status or the equivalent, or you must find a fiscal sponsor. And there is up to $10,000 available, and this process is rolling. Examples of prior support include, but are not limited to, funds to repair a damaged boiler system or a leaky roof, or funding to publish the Riverfront Greenways Guide, which helps residents fully enjoy the rivers in our Valley region. For this process, grants are typically acted on and awarded within a 60-day time frame. And again, the application is up on the website. Our sponsorships are for one-day events serving the towns previously described, or the majority of the services are performed in those towns. Organizations, again, must be 501c3 or equivalent, must find a fiscal sponsor. And if you are interested in applying for a sponsorship, it is important that you get to us at least 60 days in advance, because it takes that long for us to review and then make the recommendations for the grant. So please make sure that you give yourselves enough time to apply for a sponsorship application. The one other thing that I will say is that as far as sponsorships go, if you need to have, there is up to $2,500 per organization per year. If your organization does an event in the spring and you need $1,000, let's say, and then you need to do another event in the fall, and that is another 500 or 1,000, you can apply to us for sponsorships for both of those events. And once again, the application is available up on our website. Last but not least is the Valley COVID-19 Response and Recovery Fund. We are very honored to have partnered with the Valley United Way, the Greater Valley Chamber of Commerce, and the Valley Council for Health and Human Services ever since the pandemic began. It is a rolling process and answers are received in, again, approximately 60 days. Grants typically range between $1,000 and $5,000 and are available to 501c3 organizations or those with fiscal nonprofit sponsors serving the 5 towns that we have discussed previously. Specific focus is on work and/or expenses related to rollout and administration of COVID-19 vaccinations and basic needs. However, if your organization is doing something in addition to vaccination support and basic needs, that could be considered as well. Please make sure that you check in with me, and my information, my contact information, will be available at the conclusion of this portion of the webinar.
So the Consultant Support Program is a short-term project for capacity building for your board or staff work. It can be on diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. It can be on fund management. It can be on development. It can be IT. It can be anything that you need a thought partner or a consultant to help you with. But it is a discrete and distinct project. It's not a long-term engagement. It's not $1,000 toward a strategic plan that's actually going to cost you $10,000. It's going to be a start and finish project. It's going to be probably about $2,000 worth of funding or $2,000 worth of time for your consultant. It can also cover other expenses if you have printing expenses or training expenses that you want to do with your staff. Things like that can happen. You can only apply once in 2023 for this funding. We have a list of consultants that you can choose from, or you can engage your own consultant. We're also happy to talk you through any of the work that you're thinking about doing, to talk about how we think you, Stephanie or Valerie, who are listed as the contacts, can talk about how your organization can best use this program to achieve what you're trying to achieve. The nonprofit management cohort for emerging leaders of color. This is for middle management people of color, perhaps program directors, development directors, people who work in finance, who aspire to be executive directors. We are currently in our second year of this program. The first cohort of 10 is in their second year of programming of the program. Our second cohort is currently in their learning. It is flexible funding for the host organization of the leader who's chosen. It's $10,000 per year for 2 years. The first year is just general operating support. The second year, $5,000 is general operating and $5,000 is to be used toward an organizational assessment and implementation plan to help the organization be stronger, that this emerging leader will lead within the organization. The applications are opening April 2nd, and the deadline to apply will be June 5th. When we look at the applications, we are not looking and assessing the organization, but we are looking at the program applicant themselves. We're looking for a demonstrated commitment to Greater New Haven and the Valley. We're looking for a commitment to staying in nonprofit services. We're looking for someone who is aspiring to take on a greater leadership role within their organization so that we can develop a pipeline of leaders for the future. So we're looking at the aspirations and the qualities of the leader, not the organization's goals. The first year of the program is a 9-month course with UConn, and the second year kicks off with that organizational assessment, and the cohort meets on a monthly basis just to check in with each other and continue the networking that they have started in the first year. Nonprofit animal shelter grants are also available to any independent nonprofit animal shelter in Greater New Haven. So any organization giving shelter to animals can be funded through the Community Foundation's Lillian and Henry Konopacki Fund. The average grant is 3,000 to 5,000, but it's available up to 7,500 is we can apply for. We're looking for new and existing programs for organizational capacity building or capital grants. This is very flexible, but it has to be an organization that an independent organization, not a municipal entity, that gives shelter to animals.
Thank you, Jackie. And finally, we're going to end with the login screen for online applications. For those of you who have been with us, you know that Blackbaud is our system for accessing all online applications. However, if you have not applied to either of the foundations in the past several years, you will need to create a new account and a new password. Your existing account and password are no longer active, and our colleague Logan Roddy can help you walk through exactly what you will need to do in terms of creating a new login and a new password. Our applications are posted on both VCF's Foundation website and the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven's website, and they're accessible by clicking on the application link. Organizations must complete an application for consideration in any grant process. We do not accept letters of intent except for the capital grant process that we will be working on with the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven later this summer. So we will explain more about that later, but everything else needs to be online. There is an eligibility quiz to make sure that your organization is eligible to apply for a grant from the Valley Community Foundation or the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. And once you have passed the quiz, you are free to access the application and apply for whatever grant that you are looking to apply to.
And we have our slide here for questions. I don't see anything in the question and answer, and I don't see anything in the chat, but this would be the time if anyone has a question to be able to write that in. And we know we had a chance to go over, we've now gone over responsive a couple of times. So if you've been with us from the beginning, you've heard a lot, maybe your questions have been answered. But if you have anything specific about Valley processes, now's the time.
Thank you, Jackie. And I'd like to just add that I am available for any questions Valley related by either calling the foundation office or to reach me at vdegangi@valleyfoundation.org. Feel free to submit any kind of questions that you have about any of our grant processes, either by sending me an email or calling me at the Valley Community Foundation office in Derby.
Thank you. There was one question that came in. Does the organization create an account or the individual? When you put in the EIN of your organization, it will link you to your organization, but you create an individual account so that you have your own login and you have access to the work that you have done.
So Jackie, I see that right now we have no further open questions. So I would like to thank everyone. Thank Jackie for joining me this morning on this part of the webinar. And please feel free to contact and reach out to me with any additional questions that you might have as it relates to the Valley Community Foundation's grant processes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning. Welcome. We're in the last section now of our nuts and bolts webinar. This section on the Greater New Haven only processes. And I see one question left over from the last session. The budget form we use to report our year-end progress, is that the online form or can we use an Excel document? The answer to that is that you can use an Excel document. You can use anything you want to report that year-end. You don't have to use a budget form provided by us. So that takes care of that question. Good morning. For those of you just joining, I'm Jackie Downing. I'm the Senior Director of Grantmaking and Nonprofit Support for the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Valerie Knight-DeGangi, the Program Officer for the Valley Community Foundation, to review grant opportunities other than responsive that are available to Greater New Haven organizations. So we're going to ask you to please write your questions into the question and answer box so that we make sure that we can traffic those. We'll be stopping along the way now and then to take the questions, and then we'll get to more questions at the end. We'll try to get to everything. So off we go.
Thank you so much, Jackie. And I am delighted to be here with you all this morning. We're going to talk a little bit about the competitive grant eligibility for all of the New Haven applications. You must have a 501c3 or equivalent, or find a sponsor for applications for Greater New Haven. All applicants must provide services in at least one town of the 20-town region, and those 20 towns are located on the map on this slide. Applicants must adhere to a policy of non-discrimination, and applicants who are previous recipients of a grant within the past 3 years must have submitted all of their required reporting. Projects that typically do not receive consideration include religious activities, endowment campaigns, travel, previously incurred debts and funding deficits, and all applicants who are past grantees must be in compliance with all of the grant reporting requirements that we have in place.
Thank you, Al. So these are the guiding principles that the foundations have that hold dear. It's our belief that an organization that's coming to us that can adhere to and strive toward these principles is a strong organization and worthy of investment. So we ask that in your application, you keep these things in mind and can somehow weave what you're doing toward these into your application throughout the questions so that we know that you are paying attention to what we think is important for an organization. The first is vision for the community. Do you have clear goals and objectives for how you're going to impact the community you serve during the time of the grant, which includes input from stakeholders with lived experience? Do you involve the people that you serve in your planning processes? How does your mission and your work contribute toward improving the social and structural determinants of equity? Is this present in your work? If so, make sure you're showing us how. Accountability. Do you have a strong system of ongoing evaluation, and do you learn from that evaluation? Are you able to tell your story of your impact? Also, your vision for the organization. In the same way that you have a vision for the community, we're hoping that you, especially if you're applying for general operating support, have clear goals and objectives for your organization and how its governance, management, operation, and programs will operate. We hope that you have a culture of diversity, equity, inclusion within your organization, that you have established policies and procedures that respect DE&I, and that members of your board and staff have been doing work toward this area and reflect the diversity of the community that you serve. We also want to be sure that you have sound practices for financial management, which include a lens for sustainability. What happens when the community foundation's funds run out? Will there be other funders in place, and have you thought ahead to be able to fill that void? So as we move through the slides today, we're going to talk about which grant processes are right for you. Some of these things are going to weigh into your decision-making. Some processes have deadlines and some are rolling. So if you can't make a particular deadline, then you may want to think about applying for a process with a rolling application or applications that are open all year long. The eligibility criteria. Not all processes are open to all types of organizations and all sizes of organizations. Where do you fit in? This is often operating budget and how long you've been providing services in the community. So take a look at what those criteria are. Also, the level of funding that's needed. As the grant award size goes up, so does the level of competition. So make sure you're applying for what you need. If you can achieve your goals with a smaller grant, maybe think about coming in for a process that might give you a faster and more favorable answer. And what type of funding do you need? Responsive has general operating support. And if you're serving multiple regions, it's program, but just the program in this area. Small grants are for capacity building, general operating, and program. What's the right program for you? And when is the funding needed? Along with application deadlines, there are also turnaround times that are different for different grant awards. So how quickly do you need an answer? Make sure you're requesting your funding in advance of incurring any expense, because previously incurred expenses cannot be charged to grants. So this is a list of grants, and we'll go into more detail. This is a list of grants that are available to both Greater New Haven and Valley-based organization as a combined process. This is one door in. It is one application. You don't apply to the Valley or New Haven. You have one application form. It's available on both websites. The responsive grants deadline is March 2nd. You can only apply for one type of responsive grant in 2023. So you have to choose if you are thinking about capital grants. If that's a priority for your organization, then wait to apply with a letter of intent in August. If you need general operating support and the people you serve are more than 50% living in our region, then general operating support is the responsive grant that is due March 2nd. If less than 50% of the population you serve lives in the 20-town region, then you can only apply for statewide or multi-region program support. And that program is defined as your programming in Greater New Haven. What do you do for our area residents? There are also nonprofit animal shelter grants, nonprofit management program for emerging leaders of color, and the consultant support program. We'll talk more about those on subsequent slides. We also have the Basic Needs Fund and Community Fund for Women and Girls. We are still developing the criteria and deadlines for those programs, so there'll be more to come, and we'll make sure you get information about those as we move forward. These are the competitive grant opportunities that are only for New Haven, Greater New Haven-based organizations. Our small grants program, our sponsorship program, and the Quinnipiac River Fund, those applications closed last Friday. It is a once-a-year process, and that application closed last Friday. So animal shelter grants, up to $7,500, but the typical grant is between $3,000 and $5,000 from the Lillian and Henry A. Konopacki Fund at the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. These are for new or existing program. It's for organizational capacity building or capital projects for any organization in Greater New Haven that provides shelter to animals. It has to be an independent nonprofit. It cannot be a municipal agency. It has to be an independent nonprofit. And the Quinnipiac River Fund works to improve the environmental quality of the and access to the Quinnipiac River and the New Haven Harbor and their watersheds. The applications are always due at the end of January. So if you work in the Quinnipiac River or New Haven Harbor watershed, you might want to think of that for the future.
Thanks, Jackie. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the nonprofit management cohort for emerging leaders of color. This is leadership development for people that are currently in leadership positions in either Greater New Haven and Valley nonprofits. For example, a program director, development director, finance director, etc. 10 to 12 people will be selected in 2023. There is flexible funding, $10,000 per year for 2 years. The applications will be open on April 2nd, and the deadline to apply is June 5th. All applicants must demonstrate a personal commitment to Greater New Haven and/or the Valley, and the focus is on the qualities of the applicant, not the organization that the applicant is working for. This is going to hopefully help develop professional development opportunities and create a leadership pipeline for emerging leaders of color in our greater New Haven region. It is a 2-year program, which includes a 9-month course with UConn and a 2nd year of leading an organizational assessment and cohort meetings. Applications will be available on both the Community Foundation of Greater New Haven's website and the Valley Community Foundation's website.
Seeing a message that the screen sharing is paused. So if somebody could just drop into the chat whether or not you're still seeing the screen, you should be seeing the screen for Greater New Haven small grants. And the Greater New Haven small grants are for new or existing programs. It is a 1-year grant application. There are 3 types of applications under small grants, and we'll talk more about those on the subsequent slides. Each of the small grant applications are up to $15,000. They're 1 year only, and they're rolling applications, so you can apply at any time for the funding that you need. You can only apply every other year for small grants. So if you had a small grant in 2022, you are not eligible to apply in 2023. It says 8 to 10 week turnaround, and the contact person for all small grants is Logan Roddy. Okay, I'm going to try to figure out what's going on with the screen share. I'm going to stop and start again. Hopefully now you're seeing the small grant slide. And this is all small grants up to $15,000, 1 year only, rolling applications every other year, 8 to 10 week turnaround. Now let's talk about the 3 different types of small grants. General operating support is totally flexible funding. It's to further the general mission or work of an organization. It can be used for operations and or program and or capital, but not all capital. You can't spend $15,000 on a capital project and make it a small grant general operating support. So it has to be a combination. So you could buy a small piece of equipment, do some staff training, use it within a program and pay the light bill. That's general operating. It's an 8 to 10 week turnaround, and Logan Roddy is the contact person to get an application for general operating support. He's also very helpful at talking you through your project to help you define whether your application should be general operating or one of the others, like program support. Program support is for a new or existing program. It doesn't have to be new and innovative. It can be the same old program that has gotten great results for the last 5 years, and we're happy to support that. It can be 1 or 2 linked programs, but it has to be budgeted independently so that we can see what the cost is and the financial impact is of those organizations. If it's an ongoing program, we'll want to know about the past outcomes. That will be helping to tell your story about why we should fund you in the future. If it's a new program, community input and strong evaluation will be compelling. We'll want to know why you're starting this program, who thinks it's a great idea, and how you're going to judge that. Again, you can apply every other year. If you had a grant in 2022, you're not eligible to apply this year. It is 1 year only, up to $15,000, and you have to contact Logan for the application. The 3rd type of small grant is capacity building. Capacity building is defined as short-term financial assistance to build the infrastructure of an organization for long-term success. So if you are bringing in staff to expand the program, that is not capacity building. But if you're bringing in a consultant to help you develop a fund development plan, a fundraising plan, and train your board how to do that fundraising, and then that development consultant goes away and your board is stronger and you're in a better fundraising position, that's capacity building. It also can include some small capital requests. Again, not $15,000 worth of capital request, but if it's a part of a capacity building project, if you need a piece of equipment and some training on that piece of equipment, it could fit in here. Projects are often things like board development, strategic planning, evaluation, fund development projects. Capital purchase can be small pieces of equipment, a few computers, maybe a small building renovation or pieces of furniture. Logan Roddy, again, is going to be your lifeline on this to be able to help you define which application is right for you for the small grants.
Thank you, Jackie. And we're going to round out with a few additional programs that you can apply for to get some very specific funding to assist your organization. The consultant support program are for short-term projects that your organization is seeking funding for to help you build your capacity or your board and staff work on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. These are for nonprofit organizations that are serving either Greater New Haven and or the Valley. They are for discrete projects, which means that this funding should not be used as part of a larger engagement with any consultant that you're working for. For example, we're not going to pay $1,000 towards $10,000 for a strategic plan that you are working on. It is to cover the consultant's time and or out-of-pocket expenses. We have a vetted list of consultants that you can choose from, or you can engage with your own consultant who can work with you to meet your needs. You are eligible for one time for the consultant support program for funding in 2023. And your award through this program will not impact your eligibility for any other grant programs that you may be applying for. The contact people for this program are my colleague Stephanie Chung and myself as it relates to any organizations that are still on the call that serve both Greater New Haven and the Valley. Sponsorships are specifically for Greater New Haven-based organizations. They are for one-day fundraising events, either virtual or in person. They are for neighborhood events, up to $2,500 in support, and the process is rolling. There is typically a 4-week turnaround, and that is really important for you to understand that if you have an event that is coming up, please make sure that you give us enough time to be able to review it and get back to you. If it comes in before the 4 weeks are up, we may not be able to provide you with that support. Sponsorships really support all of the work that you are doing, as I said, either virtually or in person, and encourage resident engagement. Applications are available on the Community Foundation's website. Finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about the login screen for online applications. Blackbaud is our system. I know that many of you have accessed Blackbaud in the past. However, if you have not applied to either of the foundations for the last several years, you will need to create a new account and a new password. Your existing account and password are no longer active, and our colleague Logan Roddy can certainly walk you through how to do that. All of the applications for all of the grant processes are posted on both our websites, on both the foundation's websites, and they're accessible by clicking on the application link. Organizations must complete an application for consideration in our grant processes. There is an eligibility quiz that you need to be able to go through in order to determine whether or not you are eligible to apply for grant funding. Once you pass the eligibility quiz, you are then able to access the application for whatever grant that you are applying for.
And I see only one question in the chat. Statewide operation, more than 50% live in the 20-town region. Are we eligible for general operating support? Yes, but because I don't know if you're based here in our 20-town region. If you have a question like that, that might be best to give a call before you start the application to either Logan or Valerie or myself to talk through where you would be most appropriate to apply. I don't see any other questions. We'll still be on for a few minutes, but I want to bring up the resource page. So if you have questions, general questions can come to me. General questions can also come to Logan Roddy. He's also the technical support for online applications. So if you have trouble getting into the Blackbaud system or have some question there, he can help you with that. Kara Strawn can help you with two different things. She can help you with reporting and evaluation questions. If you don't know if all of your reports are up to date, Kara would be the one to help you with that. She can also help with outcomes. If you draft your outcomes and want more information as to whether or not they're what we're looking for, if you get them to Kara in advance, not the day of the deadline, but at least a week in advance, then Kara can help you craft those outcomes so that they're well written. Sponsorship questions and anything give greater goes to Stephanie Chung. Louis Rodriguez is heading up our animal shelter grants this year. And all Valley grant processes and general questions about responsive can also go to Valerie Knight-DeGangi at the Valley Community Foundation. Regarding the consultant support program, can this be used to cover the cost of an attorney and engineering firm needed to do the preparation for a larger capacity building project? I'm not sure the $2,000 is going to cover an attorney and an engineering firm because the maximum on that is about $2,000. You might want to talk to Pro Bono Partnership in Hartford about providing legal counsel. That is if you apply to them, they can provide some free pro bono legal counsel by a network of about 6,000 different attorneys in the tri-state area with varied expertise, so they can do that. An engineering firm, yes, could help with a larger capacity building project, but the engineering project would have to be a discrete standalone project. And you can apply for consultant support in addition to any of the other grant processes that you're in. But remember, you can only apply once a year for consultant support, so choose wisely. We're just about at time. We have a couple of minutes left. I will stop sharing the screen and rejoin in case there are any other questions that you'd like to ask. I know we still have some folks online. If there wasn't anything that was clear through any of the presentations, now is the chance. We have 6 minutes left, and now is your chance to ask those questions. Don't forget the Give Greater profile is different than the Great Give. It takes about 6 to 8 hours to start and finish a Give Greater profile. So make sure you're doing that as soon as you can. And Stephanie is there to help anyone who needs that. I don't see any other questions coming in. So I will thank first my colleagues, Valerie and Stephanie, for making the day go so smoothly. I think we got lots of information through. Hopefully we answered all of your questions, but we look forward to hearing from you if you have further questions. Thank you all for being with us this morning. We appreciate your time. We appreciate you taking the time to listen in and to understand more. That's the way this works. We're happy to be a partner with you and give you that information. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have questions. Thank you. Thanks all. Have a good day and have a good, this is not Friday. No, this is only Tuesday. Well, have a good weekend when it gets here. Bye-bye.